Okay, so even though I actually just recently started doing notes for my review so I don't forget anything, I can't, or pretty much let's just say I don't want to do this in this case, just because that's usually for the more mainstream videos where I just want to stay to the point, don't want to kind of strafe off the way. Which is not the thing today, because when it comes to something more audio, if I just something that I want to talk a little bit more about, then it's okay if I ramble on a little bit, even though I will kind of try to keep the same structure. And I think also, since I recently reviewed a few more budget headphones, it's fine if I go to something a little bit more expensive again today, especially if it's as good as this. This, by the way, today would be the Denon AH-D5200. I also, just in case you care, have the 7200 here, and the 9200. I will make a separate review for all of those, but a big comparison is actually what I'm looking mostly forward to, because that's so interesting. Now, price-wise, actually, I think it would be best if you just check it on your own, because, for example, in Germany, these are at the moment 420 euros. They recently were like almost 500, so the price even dropped since I got them like 3 weeks ago by now. And in the US, I found them for price at around $700 or $800, which is a little bit odd, because these, at least on Amazon.com, were only $100 more at like $800. These are 599 euros in Germany, and these are 1400, even though officially those are like 1600. So quite a big difference. Actually, not between those two, at least not in the US. In Germany, like I said, difference of around 180 euros. Is it worth it? Well, we'll see. So, first I want to get into what I actually don't really like that much, which is the design and build quality. Build quality not, but design. Okay, let's actually cover build quality first, because I cannot fault them for anything here, because the execution here, everything feels very smooth. I mean, the wood, something that you prefer. I have to actually say, if I look at it this way, everything feels executed well, especially I like the numbers here. This also works so nice. The leather stitching and everything else. But this does not really feel super like luxuriously premium. Very nice, high quality, especially the higher end ones, even so. But none of those really give me the appearance that I think, wow, this is pure luxury. I mean, obviously this one isn't really at that price yet, but like I said, great execution. I like the, and then I don't really care if it's real leather or not, because I think it's protein leather, which is actually totally fine for me, because it feels really, really good in my opinion. Now these ones have kind of the thickest and softest padding of all the other ones, but I'm getting more into the other ones in the comparison, but this feels quite good, even though I'm generally not a big fan of this band, because it mostly kind of sits like on that place, but you feel the band noticeably on your head, and then there are those pads that I can't really get warm with those, because I personally still think for a longer period of time, if you listen to them, these are still a little bit too narrow. This should have been a little bit of a wider cutout, and I would actually also like for them to be a little bit thicker. Maybe also then a little bit softer, because they are just not super comfortable. I mean, for like an hour or two, and I've actually used them for like 3 hours or more at the piece, and it was fine, but it never really felt like super comfortable, because this is after all quite hard. Due to the clamping force, I have to say, which is pretty much ideally chosen, because when you have them on, the fit is really good, but it actually feels like it's not pushing too much from the sides, and only after a while, after you use them longer, then this feels a little bit hard, especially since the stitching is quite obviously on the sides here. So maybe not the biggest fan of that. Otherwise, like I said, the rest is fine. About the cable, one thing that I like is obviously that it's replaceable, but this should be actually quite easy to be changed, because as you can see, a normal headphone jack just works, so this shouldn't be easy. It looks like it's a little bit kind of indented, so a little bit further in, but I don't think that's an issue. About the cable, I have to say pretty much the same as for the headphones. It feels high quality, but it's a little bit too stiff, and I don't really like it so much. I like the integration of the 1/4 inch. That is also fine, and it looks good. I mean, the cable does a good job. It feels solid, it feels robust, but it's a little bit too much on the stiff side, which, like I said, is also a case for the pads. And I would actually say that I'm pretty sure, actually very positive, that these pads, if you replace them with something maybe more soft or thicker, bigger also, will heavily improve the overall comfort of these. Swivel, good enough, no problem. So let me actually just put them on. And here's actually where my first little bit of an issue starts. They look normal on my head, but for some reason, and I have them both adjusted to 6, which is actually different to the other ones because those are fine with 5. But for me, it always feels like this cup is a little bit lower and this one is a little bit higher and they feel off balance. But it's not really the case, and I've tried what I wanted to do. Obviously, like I said, the headband, you definitely feel it. And it's not a super lightweight, but that's the thing. You can use them for hours and hours and it will be fine. But it's not something super luxurious. It doesn't feel super comfortable or anything like that. There's no fatigue or something like that. And I guess if it's a little bit warmer, you will definitely sweat under them. It wasn't so much an issue for me right now, even though it was already, I would say, pretty warm sometimes in my room. But you can have them on and you can be okay with them. But in my opinion, those are never headphones that are like really comfortable for a long period of time. If you exchange the pads, I think so. The headband isn't an issue for me. I mean, design, aesthetics comes down to your personal preference. So that's that. About the isolation, I have to say it's normal. Nothing really out of the ordinary. I'm fine with that. Now, equalization or amplification. How easy are they to drive? Actually, surprisingly easy for something that sounds so kind of audiophile and high quality. Because I've tried, for example, with my NFB1128. Yeah, we don't need to talk about it. That's like super easy. And then I also, for example, tried it with the iFi X-Can. Works absolutely without any problems. I was still in the yellow, so no problems. So these are super easy. If I compare them to something like my LCD2C, where I had the setting like almost 90 on my, in Windows, for example, with the amp and so on, these were like at 60. So a difference of like 30 clicks or volume steps on Windows, and that's quite a big margin. So I think these are pretty easy to drive. You don't need something super high-end, but I definitely felt like if you use something a little bit more sophisticated, like for example the NFB1128 over something different, it definitely knows to show that its potential is still there. Now, are they okay with a phone? I still don't think so. Maybe with an LG phone with a quad deck, but with a normal phone like the OnePlus 5T that I had, I didn't nearly get the volume that I need after all. Some people actually will do, but yeah. Okay, before we are getting into the sound, I want to just make one thing super sure. I maybe won't sound like super impressed, but that is also because these are all so good, and especially if I wouldn't have had the other two ones. I think this review would have sounded generally way more positive, because only having the other twos, I know what's possible in terms of higher quality sound. And I'm not talking about the signature or anything. Like the drivers can be even better and the general soundstage can be better, the general attributes. But this on its own actually maybe has one advantage over the other two. It's pretty much flawless. I mean, I can't find something that I could fault it for. If there is something maybe not quite my thing, quite my alley due to maybe the signature, which actually fits mine quite good, I can't blame it for that. I can't. I mean, that's why I'm gonna say this also. The better something is, the harder I try to find something to pick on. That's just how I work. But if I would compare these to anything else, and I've actually also tweeted that out for a while, I think on Instagram, I said that I have the 5200 and the 7200 here, and everything else that I have at home right now kind of sounds like crap. I mean, obviously that was a little bit maybe too early judge, but still, if I use these for a kind of extended period of time and change to anything that I have here, which actually also includes my LCD2C, all of those sound oddly worse, but not really, because this also has to do with the general sound that these have. These sound like kind of mainstream because they are definitely sounded, but on a high quality audiophiles level. And that is just something different, because I don't have anything that sounds like these, and that's why I'm actually later on not really going to compare them with anything else, because, for example, I have the 1060C, the closed ones, which obviously should be compared with other closed ones, and I've tried it. I actually thought about checked what is better on this and this, but the longer I listened to both of them, AB and BAB, I thought, no, it makes no sense. They are so vastly different that a comparison doesn't really make sense, and I've not used anything at a higher end stage with this kind of sound set. Obviously I have something kind of similar at the $100 price segment, but the quality is not nearly there that it makes any sense. So let's get to the qualities, and keep in mind that the others maybe aren't actually quite as in terms of kind of balance as I wanted to, like this one is, but they can, just in terms of actual quality, sound better. Now, soundstage and imaging. I have to say, maybe to your surprise, I'm not someone who really gives too much on soundstage and imaging. If the soundstage isn't like super narrow, I'm okay with that, and I don't really like it actually too big. So somewhere in between actually works out good, and that's why I have no real problems here with this. These obviously sound close, but that is totally fine. The imaging, in my opinion, also works quite okay. So I'm not really gonna get much into that, maybe a little bit later on in the comparison for another video, but I'm pretty pleased with the imaging. It's on the level that I would expect from a headphone like this, and the soundstage was on a medium-sized level. I'm okay with that. I'm actually totally fine with that. And with the signature maybe even more so, because, I mean, obviously the bass is boosted, but the bass is also so good, but I'm not gonna get into that later on. The highs are ever so slightly maybe boosted, but actually pretty neutral. The mids are a little bit recessed. That's something that you definitely notice, because especially vocals are a little bit actually on par. They are actually on par with the instruments, which is something that I personally would prefer to be the other way around. So when I'm saying they are recessed, it's actually in this case that they are on par, but I like them in front. But a general sound signature does sound like a mainstream kinda like sounded headphone, but on a so much higher, so much more enjoyable level, which is actually the thing. These are so much fun, which brings me to the next attributes, the bass. I mean, what all of these three have in common is pretty much the best bass that I've heard so far in its specific price range, because they have a such kind of lush but warm but definitely tight bass. I mean, obviously this is where you can obviously see the differences compared to something like a 7200. The 7200 just has more sub bass, and it's actually even more so boosted in the bass, and it just has more qualities. And I'm not even gonna start with the 9200 here just yet, because those, what they can do in terms of bass, I have not experienced yet. But these have a super nice bass. I mean, it's slightly warm, but it's impactful, it's quite punchy, it's never boomy or anything like that. It doesn't really bleed into the mids, it actually stays where it should be, and they're quite energetic. So in case you wanna hear with them something bass heavy, trap music, hip hop, so works so good, because they actually have such a strong tight bass that the ear pads, if you have them on, vibrate a little bit, but you actually feel that punch, and this is so enjoyable. Sub bass maybe not quite as impressive like on the other two ones, but it makes a totally nice job. Like I said, this whole thing is a little bit elevated to the compared to the rest. The mids, I would say, definitely are for me the least impressive part, because like I said, I would wish for them to be a little bit more pushed forward, and they can't really shine as much as maybe some other ones where it just put more emphasis. You definitely notice that these put the bass in the front, which is definitely the highlight, and the highs do a very nice job, and the bass, the mids maybe aren't quite on that level, but totally enjoyable, because vocals sounded good, everything sounded very, I would say, like pleasantly warm, but kind of intimate enough. Obviously with the vocals being a little bit further off push, but I really like that quite a lot, I have to say. So pretty decent bass for this price range. I mean, generally for something cheaper, really good. And then there are the highs that in some cases actually might seem a little bit too low, but what I've noticed is that if you don't have them properly on, maybe a little bit too far, like towards the back, and you don't have them properly centered, then you lose quite on some highs. So if you have them properly centered, or actually not really centered in this case, on, the highs are absolutely fine. I mean, there isn't a roll-off, and they definitely don't shine too much, but they sound definitely not open or super airy. They are definitely closed. You just notice that this is still after a close play, and they're not super bright. I would actually not call them though dark either, so somewhere in between, so pretty neutral highs, but details enough for this price range. Here is where the 9200 shine absolutely, and yeah, the 72 actually not that much. So I actually prefer the high end here. The treble is a little bit more sparkling, a little bit more open, a little bit more fresh, and generally this makes it sound good for everything. Because for example, if I try to listen to them for metal, I enjoyed it a lot. Rock, absolutely. Pop, absolutely. Bass heavy music, like I said, everything with bass. If it's electrical bass or if it's actual bass from an instrument, so well done. Also ballads works amazingly, classic music, I mean, they can do this also good. I mean, the general sound aspect here is to kind of be, and that's what I actually wanted to give it for the 7200, but I'm gonna say this already, where I would maybe call the 7200 embracing, like these are, let's give it a little bit less of an praise, let's say hugging, because it feels like you are so much nicely covered in a blanket of music that feels kind of so done, really nice. So yeah, let's look at them again. Now, like I said, if I would have to find something, like for example for my pros and cons, I mean, yes, I have cons in terms of the overall design. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the cable, and I'm not the biggest fan of the pads or the whole design. There are just better ones out there. I'm just gonna say it like this. This is okay, but if it comes down to the sound, I wouldn't really know where I should start, because no complaints at all about the soundstage or the imaging. They are easy to power. They have a very nice, actually pleasant all-around signature. They work for everything really well. I mean, they don't really stand out for anything in particular either, but everything they do really good. And this is what it comes down to most, because the bass, super impressive. Maybe the mids not so much, but still totally okay. They are not kind of dragging them any down or something like that. Then we have a treble that works out totally fine. Actually, I prefer it noticeably over the 7200s. So I mean, I think it actually comes down a little bit to the price, because if they are at around $700, then the competition is much more fierce. Then they're actually a little bit too close to the 7200. That makes definitely things different. It comes down to what you prefer more. I'm gonna get into that in the comparison. But I think at 700 they have a little bit of a harder time, just because I think there's some competition out there that I've actually not even tried, but just knowing from what's out there, trying it on shows and so on, then it will be harder. But if I think around 420 euros for these, I mean, for example, if I look at my 1060C from Monoprice, they, with import costs and also like all around that, are at about the same price. If you buy them in the States, I mean, obviously then they cost around like $320 and might seem to offer the better value, and definitely you get, after all, the planar bass. But if I would have to choose something that is just fun to listen to, yeah, but like I said, they aren't comparable, because the 1060C are so much more neutral. The bass is plainer and completely different. Especially, there were some songs where I actually thought, yeah, I think I actually like the 1060C bass more, but the bass here is so nice and tight, precise. The resolution is pretty good for the price and everything else. So they make a pretty impressive job. So the only reason why I'm not kind of like ecstatic about those is just because I know what's possible in terms of quality of those attributes, like the bass, the mids and the highs, from the bigger brothers. But if you would, for example, give me the qualities of the 9200 with the signature of this one, oh boy, I'd be in trouble, because then I kind of would have to buy something like this. And I generally have to say, they are maybe not quite my cup of tea because of the whole thing. I mean, I think if I would change the pads, unfortunately I didn't have any alternatives here, I think I would like them even more so in terms of build quality. But I also have to say this: when I first got the 7200 and the 5200 and used them for the first 2 weeks before I actually got the 9200, which I only have for 2 weeks about here right now, I noticed that I wasn't quite as impressed by those. But the longer I listened to these, the more impressed I got, because the more I could appreciate all the good stuff, and the more of one flaw I found on the 7200. But that's up for another discussion. So, unfortunately, like I told you, I couldn't really give you any kind of competitors. I mean, there are something like Fostex that seem to be very similar to these. There's talk like that. I think it's Fostex who makes the drivers for these, but they are not the same as in some certain Fostex and so on. The general shape looks pretty similar. But I can't judge it, and that's why I don't want to. So I hope it was informative enough, and if I forgot something, I mean, there are obviously still the comments where you can ask me stuff, and there is more Denon stuff coming, because it's definitely worth it. So I'm gonna wrap it up. Yeah, that was the wrap up. Okay, until next time.